think if you're from the inside, you're crippled by the challenge, and seeing a different perspective is really hard. And this applies for any industry. If you're from the inside, you have the in-group thinking deeply ingrained, and then to change that perspective and see the different solution is going to be extremely difficult. You might be wanting to solve the same problem, but the solution might be different depending on the lens that you have of the world. Hi, I'm Naby Mariyam. I'm the founder and CEO of Coverhero. This is the future of insurance.
Hey everyone, I'm Rob Savitsky from Duck Creek Technologies, a provider of SaaS core systems for P&C insurers, and I'm the host of our new podcast series, Conversations on the Creek. In each episode, we interview our partners from across the insurtech ecosystem about industry trends, innovative technology solutions insurers are using today, and where P&C insurers may be headed in the future. So listen and subscribe to Conversations on the Creek on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and by visiting duckcreek.com/podcast/partner.
Naby, thank you for joining me. It's great to finally connect with you. We both were saying we've been sort of around each other, at least on LinkedIn and the webinar scene for a couple of years now. So this is perhaps long overdue.
Absolutely. I've been following your journey as well. So I'm glad that we finally made it happen.
Yeah. You virtually at least have been close. You're doing things like with Insuretech Hartford. That's only a couple hours away from me. So I felt like, all right, that was the sign that I need to actually just reach out and make this happen. But I'm excited to talk to you tonight for me, tomorrow morning, I guess, for you. The joys of the internet. Naby, tell us a little bit, you said where you're from, but what is that? For people who aren't familiar with Coverhero, what is it that you're building?
Yeah. So Coverhero started a couple of years ago as a side hustle after I had a really terrible insurance experience with my partner who got cancer and had to lodge all this insurance claim, and we were both self-employed, and it was a disaster. And long story short, I lost a lot of money and I was heartbroken. He was fine. We broke up, and it was really terrible experience. They got me curious about insurance, why it's so difficult, why is it so complicated, and why it happened to me. And then started Coverhero to make insurance transparent, simple, and bring it to the modern world. In the first year, we built a recommendation engine, kind of a product that would connect the marketplace and find the right products and recommend it to the end user, and to realize some of the challenges of the industry around technology. And how that was very difficult to accomplish because of the legacy systems and all of the value chain challenges and compliance challenges and the regulatory challenges and how archaic the industry was. So we went back to the drawing book, and I spent 2018 just traveling around the world across Europe and America, speaking to insurtechs, speaking to VCs, and they're really trying to understand the industry problems, because I'm from outside the industry. I come from academia and the startup world and social science world. So I spoke to about 200 to 300 insurance executives from all the way from reinsurers up to brokers, agents, you name it, everybody, and then startups too.
Let me stop you on that point, because having been at a startup and pitched a couple, the advice from VCs is always, or the question is so have you talked to 100 customers? Or 100, whether it's customers or people out in the world that can give you insight, and everyone says yes, and no one actually has. You've gone and you talked to 200-300. Did you see a difference from that? That much perspective? Was there value in it? Or was it okay, after the first 40, I'm hearing the same thing?
Yes, I did. So I clustered them into, so as a social scientist researcher, I specialize in huge amounts of qualitative data analysis and phenomenology. And the methodology that we use is called grounded theory in understanding the problem. Because I found a problem, created a solution. There was no problem solution fit. So I was okay, we need to go and understand the problem in depth.
Yeah.
So that means need to understand the industry value chain problem, need to understand consumer problem, need to understand where the investments are going. So I spoke to like all the top startups in Germany. I spent a lot of time with Munich Re there, with their innovation lab activities that was going on. So I spoke to, GetSafe and Koya and WeFox and these guys, the early days, then went to New York and spoke to a whole range of people there. Then spoke to insurers and carriers in Australia, in the US, both East Coast and West Coast, and in Europe as well. So I got like this really big kind of like holistic view of what the industry challenges are. I understood very well what the consumer problems are as a consumer, and also what was happening in big tech. So then bringing all of those perspectives together, we realized what the gap in the market was. The technology gap was very clear.
Yeah.
The consumer gap was very clear. The solution wasn't very clear. Like, how do we build a product and what is the product that we need to build? So we started building Hustle as a product first, was solving this massive financial insecurity for self-employed people and being able to simplify the product where the customer experience can happen in like 30 seconds. So we were solving a major underwriting problem and an acquisition problem, but going direct to market, and also a consumer problem around value alignment and making sure the brand resonated with the entrepreneurial community and the entrepreneurial mindset. And then created and launched last year in beta. And then the pandemic happened and things didn't go as we planned. So then we had to do more testing and iteration around who our end user was. And the end user is always the buyer, but then we had to adjust our go-to-market. We had to adjust our channel. So now the company has evolved into, the way we see Coverhero is a platform that embeds insurance across any other platform, that empowers the platform economy at point of sale for personal lines of insurance. So things like income protection, life insurance, home insurance, and then putting the user in the middle so that the user can find our products on platforms that they consume other products. So that's the big vision for Coverhero. We have some very exciting announcements we are making. In about a month's time around Hustle, we also made an announcement about our smart home insurance API, Lucci, early in the year as well. So you will see the direction of Coverhero has kind of evolved over the years through our learnings and constantly like changing and iterating and like micro adjustments to really find where we fit in the market. And it's all about embedded point of sale, very data driven kind of insurance that can be, seamlessly bought.
So I was curious when you're talking about the product market fit and what is the problem we're trying to solve, and adding that with your backstory and kind of what brought you to that moment of saying, hang on, this isn't working. People are being left out in the cold. The system and the solutions that are built today are not fit for purpose. So I was expecting it to be this sort of like backstop personal accident, disability type cover that's hard to get when you're certainly when you're on your own, when you're independent or side hustle, self-employed. But it sounds like what you're talking about is more about the platform itself. So it wasn't, this is the insurance product that's missing. It's more, this is the total experience that's broken. And then there are these insurance products that sort of become the casualties of war because the whole path to getting to them is busted. Is that more how you see it?
Yeah, I think we are solving a massive distribution problem. I think, and I did a LinkedIn post about this, our vision for Coverhero is the intersection of marketing technology and financial technology. Okay. So if we think about marketing technology and the dominance of Facebook and Google and YouTube and Instagram and all the social networks, they own the customer attention, and therefore they're in a leveraged position to charge money to companies that want to acquire customers, right? Yeah. And they have amazing data and they can do intelligent targeting. So in terms of distribution and customer reach, they own that space. Now, what we're building is point of sale transactionable API, which is kind of disrupting marketing technology, right? So how we see it is embedded finance, embedded insurance, these kinds of products that are coming into the market is just kind of surpasses, ad spend, kind of surpasses intent marketing, all this stuff, just gets rid of the whole sales funnel, goes just right to the bottom of acquisition, and you place the product in there. Instead of showing an in-app ad, imagine a transactionable ad.
Yeah.
And that's what the technology is. And that is only possible because the platform economy has matured, the gig economy, the content creators. So it's kind of like, how do we design products today in a way that is going to acquire customers with really low cost, but at the same time, leverage the data to ensure that the product is what the customer really needs.
Yeah.
And that is possible. And that's our vision, is creating that for the customers.
Is that leveraging some of what you built in the initial kind of idea for being that matchmaking sort of marketplace? Because it sounds like there's some of that intelligence at play here. Or was it really like, this isn't working, let's start again and solve what we've discovered?
So we have, yes, we have built a lot of products and shelved a lot of products. The first product was this smart wallet recommendation engine kind of thing. Then we park that, and then we build a smart contract for flight delay. And then we realized we did not need to build that on Ethereum. We could just build it in the cloud, like simply just as a normal product.
Yeah.
So we built that as well. So we built a parametric travel product. So we still have that. And then it just like naturally evolved. Like everything that we did as part of our R&D testing and learning, we got back to the same thing. We cannot put Band-Aid on something that needs re-engineering.
Yeah.
And we were trying to put Band-Aid on a lot of things, and we weren't brave enough to be super ambitious to say, hey, we want to solve this problem. In order to solve the problem, we need to start from scratch. So in order to solve that very difficult problem, we have to create a whole infrastructure to realize that it has to connect to a certain way that the products are designed and underwritten, or the risk models, or how the compliance and reporting is done, or how all of the back office administration is going to work. So something that started with, let's make insurance simple, transparent, and hyper-personalized, kind of evolved into building a core infrastructure to then be able to realize that vision. But we never went out to do that. We went out to solve that problem, and the solution has evolved over time.
Yeah, it's something I've written about before. It's tricky as a startup, as a young company, to have that vision, have the thing you think you're working on, and not stay so open that you're constantly taken off track and you never deliver anything, but also not stay so laser focused on what your original idea was, at the risk of not discovering that there is no product market fit, or things have evolved while you were trying to build it and now the market's moved. So that figuring out that balance is incredibly hard to do. And it sounds like you guys have been threading that needle since your inception.
Yeah, and then we have found it now, because the way we look at product market fit is kind of like dating. When you have enough demand, that's when you've created something in the market that people find value. Mm-hmm. So when we launched Coverhero's first product, which is Hustle, we wanted to see who is the customer. Is it the end user? Is it the platform? But we didn't build the technology to serve the platform. We built the technology to serve the end user. But then for the end users to know about the product, we needed a huge marketing budget to create customer awareness. And I was like, we really don't want to do that. We want to really find out whose problem are we solving? Are we solving the platform's problem and the user's problem? And what's the easiest way to get to the user? So then we noticed platforms coming to us and saying, hey, really like what you're doing. We'd like to offer this to you. So then we started understanding like our different distribution verticals and the interest and the huge scale that we could access. But we were not going to go and start building product for a new segment that nobody is playing in, because it's kind of risky.
Yeah.
Right. So we had to like really validate and really speak to these platforms around what we are going to build. And only this year we started building these APIs, and then how it would interface, because the platforms that we interface with have currently no insurance proposition on there.
Yeah.
So it's like total blue ocean space.
Yeah.
And that is scary. Nobody wants to go to the blue ocean first, right?
Yeah. But if you can do it successfully, it's a great story. But yeah, it's there's unknown in it.
Yeah.
So because you've talked to people all over the world, and I mean, genuinely, like I saw you on an event with the Insuretech Business Series a few weeks before we recorded this. Like you literally are connecting everywhere. You're also seeing the differences in the markets and the issues that they're facing and whatnot. Is what you're building a universal or global solution, or like where do you see the markets are ready for something like this? Like you mentioned that the platform economy is mature now. From what I've seen, like that varies in different geographies. Is that what you're finding as well? There's certain places that are ready for this and others that it's like you're watching, but like I think the US is behind on that front. Maybe I'm wrong, but versus like Southeast Asia or some of the other economies where I think like people are more integrated into a lot of these platforms.
Yeah.
Is that what you're finding?
We're building a global universal API. The dream and the huge vision is the democratization of insurance. Because if you think about an entrepreneur, they travel around the world. They want coverage no matter where they are. They want it to be relevant, and this is what the customer wants. And if you're a platform worker, let's say, there are a number of different types of platforms, and I think it's really important to understand the evolution of micro entrepreneurship and the evolution of gig economy and passion economy and creator economy. And MasterCard predicts that the workforce of the world is going to be 50% self-employed by 2023. And that is huge, because it kind of like, it's not the SME market, it's not the corporate market, it's people that have been in corporate jobs, like yourself and me, that have gone out into the world. But there's this new segment of solo entrepreneurs that are making a lot of money by monetizing their passion. And they might be driving for Uber today, and then tonight they might be making Instagram reels, they might have a side hustle doing design work. So this kind of group are leveraging platforms. So the platforms universally all around the world across geographies are quite mature and have a massive, a very sticky audience. So even in North America or South America or even Asia, and then other emerging markets, these platforms are quite mature. So the way the users behave on these platforms are quite universal. And the problems are also quite universal, but the solution is slightly different. The challenge is the regulatory frameworks of each jurisdiction. So we're building a platform that can plug into those jurisdictional capabilities. The solution is similar because we're solving the same problem regardless of the jurisdiction. The regulatory solution is different for each jurisdiction. So we're kind of building this like middle layer of software that connects the user to the insurer and then the regulator as well. So it's building tech that solves two big customer problems. Well, three big customer problems: the buyer and the seller and the regulator. And without building those three components, we won't be able to realize the vision.
I think it's that last one, the regulator, that's probably the other than people saying legacy tech, regulatory is sort of the biggest hang up that we have as an industry, because of the fact that you can't have one solution that applies everywhere, even within a country quite often. So that's no small feat that you're working on. You say it like, you're just talking about this and you're like, and this is what we're building, but it's actually tremendous lift that you're undertaking. But you've been able to do it so far, and you act as an MGA, is that right?
So currently we are an authorized representative of an AFSL holder. And eventually, as our user base grows and as we become bigger and as we start scaling, that model will change and shift to what is going to help us grow. And then in whether it's a partnership with an MGA or we become an MGA, depending on where we operate, we keep that open around the structure. And it is what allows us to go to market super fast and in a very seamless kind of way. So we're not very strict on how we structure it. And it's about providing the solution, embedding the product into the platforms and getting it to the hands of users as fast as possible. And once that is done, then we can look at, from a back end structuring perspective, how do we improve it? How do we optimize it? But there's secondary.
Yeah. So that model definitely gives you the freedom to solve for the regulatory differences in every jurisdiction. By partnering with capacity in each of those jurisdictions. If you were an MGA, one MGA, you'd have to solve for all of those yourself and then have the capacity standing behind you. So that makes a lot of sense. But I appreciate the sense of flexibility for what we face when we face it. There's likely to be a right model there, and we'll cross that bridge then. Talk to me a little bit about the future. It would be wrong for a podcast called The Future of Insurance not to get into this, but where are things headed? I mean, you talked about the nature of work changing, and I know just in the US during the pandemic, the Small Business Administration showed more new businesses created literally than ever before in the history of the country. And it's not just because there's more people. It was this huge step change because people don't have access to the work they used to do, or from being at home and working remotely. I mean, this, what do they call it? The great resignation that's coming. A lot of people don't want to go back to working the way they did, or they had to solve for it another way. So it showed them that, what's possible. So I totally believe that stat that from MasterCard, that was half the world by 2023. And it'll probably continue to increase. Is that the catalyst? Are there other things going on? Like, what do you see? What are the dynamics shifting the industry, and where do you see things headed for what insurance means to people going forward?
I think it was always heading in that direction. And when COVID happened, it kind of forced the world to accelerate that process. Because there was no other way. Because if we think about human beings, we are most empowered when we are happy, when we are creative, when we are motivated, when we are connected. And for many years, the only option was, go to uni, get a corporate job, work your way up to the top. Even if you hated the job, you have to stay there because you've got a mortgage and family and all these other things that we need to do. And now, with the rise of big tech and the maturity of big tech that enables people to create a business in a matter of days and go to market. Like a really good example of something that's happening in the world, that has happened in the world, is, for example, retail sector and Shopify, right? And the big commerce and WooCommerce commerce, and how fast that has grown and how technology has seamlessly integrated the supply chain has kind of has been a big part of this micro entrepreneurship. And then the second part is Instagram and TikTok, the ability to connect to an audience and acquire customers, and people becoming content creators. Anybody can become an influencer or create your own channel, create your own following. Those are the two big things. Disrupting the media industry, disrupting the supply chain. And there are some companies like, Facebook and Google and Shopify and the likes that has created the opportunity and removed barriers of entry. That is the big catalyst for it. The second thing that has happened is the people's risk appetite has changed because of COVID, knowing that, hey, you're going to be fine if you don't have a corporate job. The work life balance that we have been advocating for decades, if not more, is kind of like, you don't have to do 9 to 5. You can spend time with your family, go for a run, eat, and get out of this industrial age mindset of knowledge workforce. And entrepreneurs are very different to working in a factory where you have to be there. And just truly realizing and letting go of that fear, people are stepping into who they are and having that courage to go out on their own to do that. And then more people are following that, right? So this like snowballing effect, because all the platforms are there, all the right pieces of the puzzles there. What's not there, and where the big opportunity is, creating something that a HR department would have in the corporate world, but for entrepreneurs, for self-employed people. There is a huge gap and massive challenges that we need to solve around mental health and well-being and a security of your finances, short-term and long-term, planning for retirement. All of these things were taken care by the big companies. When you're self-employed, you have to do that on your own.
Yeah.
So huge challenge, huge opportunity. And also it's forcing people to become more financially literate, because you have to make that decision now.
Yeah. Financially literate, corporate or business literate. Like you have to navigate getting your business insurance, getting whatever licensure you need, and things that, like, I worked for insurance companies for 20 years. There were lots of licenses involved in so many of the things that I did or was responsible for. I didn't have to do anything to make any of those things happen. There's a whole function for that. And now it's like, when I incorporated, like that was on me. You have to figure these things out for yourself. And it's scary the first time, but the resources, I mean, when you're talking about big tech, there's all these other resources for people to build their own business in a way that's never existed before. It's really interesting watching, as someone who's risk averse, right? Like, and my last question to you is going to be around whether someone from within the insurance industry could do what you're doing. But I'm curious about that, because like I come from such a risk averse mindset that it's scary to make that leap. But obviously people do it. I'm curious what your take is, not just for the leap taking, but the seeing the problem and a path to solving it. Do you think you needed to be outside of the industry to be able to do that?
I think if you're from the inside, you're crippled by the challenge, and seeing a different perspective is really hard, right? And this applies for any industry. If you're from the inside, you have the in-group thinking deeply ingrained, and then to change that perspective and see the different solution is going to be extremely difficult. So if you think about, Uber wasn't created by transport industry, Airbnb wasn't created by the hotel industry, right? You might be wanting to solve the same problem, but the solution might be different depending on the lens that you have of the world. So insurance industry veterans will create solutions that solve really big problems. People that are outside of the industry will create solutions that are very different to an industry veteran would create. It's just the way our brain works and how we see the world, and therefore the solutions would look different. So, and both groups bring different insights and different perspectives to solve the same problem. But I don't believe that the industry veterans will be able to create an Uber of insurance. And I don't mean, going like literally, but I'm saying something so radical and so different, because the risk appetite, because it would seem so difficult trying to even attempt to do it. If you're from the outside, you're a little bit naive and you don't really truly understand the challenge until you go deep into it. But then now you're deep into it, you have no choice but to still solve the problem. So I think it's just that like level of risk, not the thinking, not just the thinking, it's the risk appetite that would hold the industry veterans back.
Yeah, maybe a bit of ignorance is bliss. So
Yes,
you
I mean,
don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
if I knew how hard this is going to be, I probably would have never started.
That tends to be what a lot of founders say.
Yeah.
And they're thankful that they didn't know at the time so that they could get to where they're at. But
if I had known, I'd be like, I'm going to need at least $100 million to pull this off.
yeah.
And now I'm like, incrementally, we can solve this problem. We can do it. Now I'm so invested in it. I'm like, we're going to make this happen.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So I think for all of us who are feeling risk averse, maybe it's a nice call to not be held back by it, and then put some blinders on so you don't see all the things that will scare you out of it. Now it's great to hear about what you're building, and an unfortunate genesis story that sparked the creation. But maybe it took that to see that there is a real problem, and it's necessary. Someone has to step up and fix it. And kudos to you guys for having some products in market and starting to solve the issue. I'm excited to see what else you create. Maybe some things that can help solve some of the gaps that I face as a solopreneur. So I'll keep watching this space, and I'll watch for the announcements you guys have coming. But I really appreciate you spending some time today on the show and sharing a bit of the Coverhero journey.
It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
That was amazing. If you didn't know about Coverhero or Hustle, their current first product, some of the other things that are coming from them, that was really deep and really technical. And for some of you, you still may not understand what it's about. And for those of you who do, you've probably been looking into what's going on with embedded. You've probably been looking into some of the micro insurance solutions, some of the ways that buying insurance and filling the coverage needs are changing. And Coverhero is absolutely at the forefront of that and creating a lot of it. I'm excited to see them continue to push into some of the new product ideas, new product spaces, and geographies. Obviously, curious for when they come over to the States. It'll be really interesting to see it. And, like we were talking about, that might solve some of the needs that I have that are just trickier for people to get coverage when they're on their own versus part of a company, and it's just part of the benefits package. But that's only like one set of coverages, and I know they're looking much broader than that. So it'll be interesting to watch. Thank you to Naby for coming on the show and sharing a bit about what they're building. I am going to keep those show notes updated because, she mentioned big announcement coming in a month. Well, that's still before this episode comes out. So you will see some of that stuff in the actual show notes. And as they continue to launch new stuff, I will keep those show notes live. So you can always come back to the Future of Insurance podcast webpage for this episode and get the latest on what Coverhero is doing. Or, of course, you can go to Coverhero's website as well. And I will link to that in the show notes too. So thank you to everyone for listening in and joining me for another episode. And I hope you will come back next time for another great guest. Thank you to all the support, people who subscribed, people who have liked, to Duck Creek for sponsoring this episode, and to Upbeat Music for the music behind the episode. And I will see you next time. Thanks so much.